PJNet.TV, Tuesday night, 9 p.m. on the eastern coast of the United States. Our bumper is running, background's ready. Our guest, Jake McCandless, standing by in the green room, and we have some people in the chat room waiting on us. So let's switch to Studio 8 in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, good evening. Welcome to PJNet.TV. I'm your host, Coach Prasick. I get to sit down here in the coach's corner and just have a good time talking to some great people. And it is the second Tuesday of the month. We do something very special on that day. Jake McCandless is our regularly scheduled guest, and we have something a little special planned for you tonight. We thought we had some topics we were going to do, but, well, either Jake changed it or God changed it or both. So to kind of warm things up and to give you a background into what the heck we're doing here, to introduce Jake, I'll just play this.
3 years ago, when I released Spiritual Prepper and began making content like this, I used the gas mask as a metaphor. I never dreamed it would become part of everyday life, as we're wearing face masks daily for COVID-19. And gas masks are being worn for protests and riots. These are trying times. Our nation seems to be spiraling out of control. And there is pain, there's hurt, there's fear, there's outrage, there's frustration, and many more emotions going on right now. In defensive actions and to provide encouragement, there's a lot of Bible verses being thrown out, which mostly are true. But they fail to present the entire biblical reality that is needed to understand these times. And if you've got a minute or two, I'd like to tell you why.
There he is himself. Jake, that I actually watched that today. And you put that out, I think less than a week ago, and it's part of a series. Now, this video had thousands and thousands of views. Do all of the ones in the series have that kind of view count?
We've had some that's really taken off. I think this is about the third highest, and maybe one of the quickest climbs. But I mean, it's so it's called a spiritual minute or two, and this one's 18 minutes. They're normally. They started.
You're a Baptist preacher then, right?
Yeah. But they all started under 2 minutes, and you know how Facebook is, so they had to extend to 3, and then this one's 18. But so 4,500, I think, that have watched it all the way through, which is huge for an 18-minute video. So it's done really well.
And it's the irony of it that kills me, because I mean, you were being metaphorical at the time. Yet some of the metaphors, it's sort of like Star Trek and Dick Tracy, and some of those things that seem futuristic at the time turn out to be contemporary. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, everywhere I go, I take a gas mask. I was spoke at a prophecy conference, and it wasn't just prophecy, it was also insight into Middle East missions. And so you had guys there who, have their face on a poster, they're wanted men and life on the line, and so security was real tight. And I come walking in with my box to go set up my book table, and I forgot about all the tightened security, and so they open it up, and there's a gas mask and ammo boxes and clips and all this stuff, and they but been doing that for a few years, going around with really pushing this gas mask metaphor of being prepared, and that's. We're wearing masks, you're supposed to be wearing masks, and we're seeing in the protest the need for gas masks. It's a wild world we're living in right now.
Well, Jake, I actually listened to the entire 18 minutes before I fell asleep, and a lot of pastors they're struggling. They, on the one hand, feel the need to say something. On the other hand, almost anything you say could be misunderstood, could be divisive. But you took that challenge head on and took it straight to the people.
Yeah, I think it's a role of as a pastor. I mean, not to deal with just anything that's in the news, but I mean this was big. We gathered that Sunday, and there'd been a protest just locally that I don't know which side got out of hand. I think the official story is there's buses that came from out of town,
Mm-hmm.
and people come off those vans, and and that started the trouble and tear gas and all this stuff. I mean, just right down the road. And so I feel like if for us to just put our heads in the sand and just continued on, I'm preaching through the book Pilgrim's Progress, using that as a guide. And so that was what this sermon was supposed to be that Sunday. I'm like, we just can't, not deal with this. And then to think how you deal with it. I mean, there's so many takes, so many opinions, so many verses. And I'm not meaning like deciding what's right or wrong, what's going on out there. I mean, just biblically how we should look at this. And a lot of times there may be true statements, but as I said, talk about in the video, we're pulling it out of the narrative of Scripture. And so that's why it was 18 minutes was probably pretty good to get into 18 minutes to walk from creation till the new earth, and the kingdom to come and Jesus' return. But within that narrative, we're never going to solve it. I mean, we can make some inroads, we can make things better to a degree, but there's always going to be some type of strife. It doesn't have to be the white and black issue that we may have right now and have had here in America, but it's going to still be some type of strife going on. And we need to realize that we're groaning out, creation's groaning out, and we need to realize there is a fix, but that fix is only through Jesus, only through his kingdom that's going to come. And that's, I hope not to downplay what's going on by any means by that. But at the same time, we need to recognize this. We're not going to create the utopia. Jesus is.
Well, and we had it right, and it was kind of refreshing for me to hear you address historical issues, because I kind of think of you as a guy who's looking into the future. So to get some inspiration from the past was kind of a breath of fresh air coming from you.
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
I think
and it
that's a
can't
compliment.
Yeah, well, you can't just stay in the end times either. It's the whole story, and it sounds so horrible to say this, but we can't also just. Man, I know so many people would just skin me alive for saying this, but hopefully everybody see my heart here. It's not just like a lot of preaching that was great that actually dealt with it, took everybody to the cross, and yes, there's reconciliation. Yes. So thankful for that, the sacrifice that was made. But the cross is just part of the full story that will culminate in Jesus' return in his kingdom. And that started with the fall in the garden and the perfect world that was made before the fall. And so I think you really got to have that whole thing and, everything in context. And we'll just get slivers, we get narrow views, and that creates division. And it's been received well. There have been some who've reached out, and again, you can't say anything right in this this time. So I preached it for the first time. It was being videoed, and I just started kind of laying out this, the situation that's going on, and the video cut off, and so it only got to me talking about the stuff that could definitely be taken wrong, and so we had to take that one down until you get it in full context,
Oh my. The churches, you have, well, and I would say you and I, we didn't know each other, but we were each doing something that we feel a compulsion of God is to take the gospel message into the digital space. And all of us, and I don't know how much frustration you were having to deal with, but I was having to deal with quite a bit. And then all of a sudden, COVID-19 comes along, and churches are flocking to online streaming like crazy. I wish I could take some of the credit for that. I wish I could give some of it to you, but I don't think either one would be correct.
No, I know with what we were doing it's crazy. When we started the online venture that we started called End Time Church, we began that over 2 years ago, and in our plans, we laid out, we wanted to be a model for the church under, I don't want to say just persecution, but under restriction within the United States. What would that look like? And we had by 2020, by the election of 2020, crazy. I mean, just where God was leading and all that stuff. And by no means do we capture that and master that, but we're doing the online thing, like you said. But it's but and then I get the process of starting it up with another fellowship within the church and seeing it from that angle as well. I don't know if you've seen the statistics, and I don't have it before me. I don't know if it's the Barna Research Group or Pew Research, or I think maybe Lifeway came out with this. The percentages that actually of church members who actually viewed their services. Have you seen those stats?
No, well, no, but I have observed view counts of individual streams,
Yeah.
and I happen to know the churches that originated these streams usually had less than 200 in attendance, yet they were getting thousands of views.
I mean, that was us. I mean, locally, when we're running, we were 2 months into this church start. We're running 45, and then we had 200, I think 70 that watched the first service live, and end up just a few hours later with like 500 views. So definitely, but statistically, I think it was only like, from their research, only 20%, just a little over 20% of church members watched their own service. Another 20% watched another service, but only 40%. And so that means a lot of those views were coming from others. But I think also speaks to, we've got to figure out exactly how to use this digital space better. And I read a great article. I get his name wrong every time I say it. Kerry Newhoff, up in Canada, always puts out great content. He had like the I think 8 things we're doing wrong, or 5 things we're doing wrong with online church. But he made some great points this past week, and one of them that really captured me is we can't just recreate what we were already doing and then try to put that online. And and the second one was making sure that we're giving help and value to our people. I mean, I know you have a vision and a direction that you're doing, and your space you're working in. But I think in the church level, we've still got to provide a way that's benefiting people rather than just giving them the service they're missing. And that's kind of the transition that I'm going through locally with the congregation. Is okay. Let's not just recreate the service. How can we actually bring value to your life, like hopefully we were doing when we were meeting together?
Well, I rejoice. I mean, regardless of the reason, I rejoice to see churches turning to digital media, online, streaming, things like that.
Yeah.
At the same time, we are obviously fumbling idiots trying to learn what we're doing here.
Right. Yes.
And you said something earlier, just recreating or reinstantiating what you're doing in the corporate worship. Yeah, boring. That puts the viewer in the role of exactly that, viewer.
Yeah.
And how do you call that a ministry? Okay. I try to think about Jesus. Okay. He obviously proclaimed, but he went to the people. Now I guess they didn't have the internet back then, for one thing, but he unlike the church leadership at the time, they were back then saying, y'all come and listen to the experts, the talking heads. Jesus took an entirely radical and different approach to his ministry where he went. And this is what drives me. This is what drives, in my mind, if you're going to have an online ministry, model it after, well, Jesus.
You can't go wrong with that. And I will say, one thing's looking back at what we've been able to do on Monday nights with the End Time Church, and it has this. I think it's a life cycle. I mean, we had tons of excitement at first, novelty, and then it gets down to those who are the core, who this is really valuing, who stick in there. And then you have those that you never know who. I've been blessed to come across some conversations with people I had no clue would be watching the service, be viewing in, and they're doing it every week, and they're being transformed through that. But it still goes back to like community, creating that community, which you're doing here. I mean, the chat here is just phenomenal. and just the fellowship and that builds from that. And I think that's, and the little bit of that we were able to do locally is what has made a step forward, other than just putting the service out there.
Well, and the other thing I notice is that some of them you see the pastor, the preacher, literally up behind the pulpit in this empty room, and you can tell it's empty, and he's up there. It's almost like he's rehearsing. And the truth is being spoken, and I'm glad to see that. But the funny thing is, I see many pastors on their front porch, and dressed kind of like you and I are dressed, and it's more like they're talking with you, instead of lecturing to you. And I think that there's an appetite out there that people want to interact with.
Yes.
With how do you interact with the gospel? But I think they're looking for a church experience that's interactive. And until now, the only thing on the menu was small group Bible study. Now we have a new digital age where we can have conversations like this and have chat rooms like that.
One of the cool phenomenons that we've seen on Monday nights, and from the beginning we pushed engagement, but using the online church platform from Life Church, which has the chat, just looks just like basically what you have here at PJNet. And through that chat, somebody may be speaking on one thing. It's usually, this happens every couple of weeks. Somebody will come in for the first time, and they will pose a question in that chat that's semi-related, unrelated, and then they will get engaged with 15 people. Now we've had to have times where we had to say, hey, this is an opportunity to love on people and to not attack. And so we've had to do some things like that, some moderating and things. But for the most part, and it's really the last several months have really been well. Like you said, it gives somebody, so you have somebody who's searching, they come across the service, and then they're able to jump in and pose a question. And I think that's a beautiful thing that you would not have happen just in a physical church.
Yeah.
So right now you mentioned it looked like I've got a little son. So we are still trying to do an online presence locally, but locally we're meeting outside. And so our church is in the middle of a neighborhood, and we've not had any inroads getting into the neighborhood. None of our those who've come to the church are actually living immediately in that neighborhood, and that's our heart. That's where the church is planted. That's where we contact. And so I watched a couple weeks ago a family come out in their garage and open the garage up and put chairs out and listen to the sermon. 3 or 4 blocks down a couple blocks down the road that hadn't walked into our church. And that's been a cool thing. It hadn't been cool as far as temperature wise, but it's been unique, and it's made us, given us visibility within the neighborhood. So folks who drive by and they see what's going on, they get to see the makeup of, the people they'd be walking in with. And we've had the chance every week to have contact with somebody, whether it was somebody walking by, able to give some water, riding bikes, pass out water. So it's been a really a cool opportunity in that way for us locally, doing it outside.
There's so many things you can do, and people have parties at their home for football games. You could do similar things with worship service and just invite your neighbors over. It gives them a chance to put a little distance between them and I think some people feel afraid, feel threatened or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll sit out there at safe space and you can still get it. In the minute or two we have remaining, you mentioned you've been out in the sun. RVs and campers are starting to get back on the road, and you got your antennas up.
Yeah. We were talking beforehand how I've got my first preaching gig was at the state park in my hometown where I grew up at the lake, and doing the camper service. And so I did it. So several weeks, it was just like 1 or 2 campers and like my parents who would come out and be there. And I'm 17 maybe at the time, and my dad talks to me and he says, you've got an opportunity just to go meet people within the campsite. So I went Saturday morning, like 9, or I think it's probably like 10, stayed till 6 at night, went camper to camper. I got to eat all kinds of food off the grill. You can tell, no, I'm loving that. All kinds of desserts. that next day, that next Sunday, we had I think somewhere 40 to 50. We had 2 different musical groups, but it just shows the power. I mean, it was a huge lesson I've carried all throughout ministry of just the drastic change of just, if you build it, they will come versus just going out and just talking and just getting to know folks.
That's cool. Yeah, like Jesus did. He went out.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
he didn't have a building.
Which we still have to do online. And I think, I know several watching are writers, and so they're looking at ways to interact with readers and those, coming to their content. And we know the number one way is to just dialogue within that, not just to post and people see that, but to actually have that interaction. Mm-hmm. And so we got to, like you said, we got to find a way to do that within this digital space.
It's going to be fascinating. The litmus test that I remind myself is, okay, once everything gets back to normal, are we going to retreat from the streaming? Are we going to retreat and go back to y'all come? There's a sign out front that announces when we have our services. That's what, and we're going to pray that God sends people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it will. Now, I don't know if we're ever going to go back to quite a complete normal, but it's going to be, I think, yeah. I mean, I know us, we've let our guard down. We want to keep that web presence, but we've dropped it down on the local level. And so keeping that up. And I tell you what, before this happened, though, we were just really getting into using social media as just outreach and within the church. And I know that sounds silly. I always had used it, but we were heavily, learning what to do and do that. And we were having huge inroads, interacting, just really being clear about who we were, where we're going, what we're trying to do. And that would, connect with folks and open conversations up. But now that's different. And so I'm telling you, as a pastor, I'm searching, how do we still make an impact in this new world?
Hand out cards with QR codes on it. Scan this and you'll be there. So, well, Jake, I encourage you, brother. You are, I look up to you as a leader in this digital space, and I appreciate your leadership, and I just can't wait to hear more. We'll do this again about this time next month, but we got to get out of the way because, Dale Didway is on his way. And but we appreciate you sharing with us, Jake. Go out and get some more sun, and I appreciate you aiming your camera.
I got one plug before I go off.
Yeah.
So our ministry released a book, a women's devotional book. No, I didn't write it, but it went out this week, and just by some fluke, it's available at the cheapest price we can get it, $7.26 just tonight on Amazon. And so before that clicks back to the full price, somebody can go get it. It's called Spiritual. Blake, spiritual.
It's $7.26. That's
Spiritual Warrior Woman. There we go. Spiritual Warrior Woman. Pray. And awesome devotional for women.
I saw that. Visit the chat room and get the link and post it in there for us, Jake. I've got to get out of the way here so Dale can make room.
Coming.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
All right, man. Take care, bud. Jake McCandless here on pjnet.tv. Always interesting, always a pioneer, always thinking out of the box. He's like a younger version of me. Okay. That's good. We need some young people. All right. Hey, listen, I got to go. We got to get Dale. We got to make room for Dale. Before I leave, 2 questions. First, what's the boldest thing you've ever done for Jesus Christ? And then second, when was that? See, the challenge is to never be satisfied with either answer.